What's up everyone, Kriddle here, and I want to give my thoughts on the recent Warrior update. So overall, the changes feel much better than the previous version of the Warrior, but gameplay is basically the exact same. You are still planting a banner, spamming 1 through 8 normal actions as they come off a cooldown, and using a technique every time readiness permits. There are some benefits to the new abilities, however, like more defense without sacrificing much, if any, DPS and threat, more utility now with having 2 stuns, a knockdown, a snare, and an interrupt. Also, it is much easier to use and switch between banners with their 5-minute duration, longer range, not to mention they don't take up a utility slot as they are now considered stances. This was probably the best change in my opinion overall. All of that said, Warrior still feels like it has ability bloat even with removing 3 of its older abilities, since now we have 4 new abilities to consider. So let's take a look at each of the new or changed abilities. In this first case, we have Pulverize and Smash. These were changed to now share a cooldown, so you really only need to have 1 on your bar. They seem to do the exact same damage, and the only other factor is the debuff that you receive if the enemy is under 40% or 20% health respectively. I usually choose Smash as my ability of choice for the stun when the mob decides to run. On more difficult enemies, however, like Karagos the Watcher, Pulverize will put in as the fight is much longer, and you can get a decent debuff from that 20% damage reduction once the mob is below 40% health. Next up, we have Punish. This ability is effectively an additional attack every 10 seconds, assuming you have high enough block rating, not to mention the bonus threat it generates, making aggro management a breeze. The only drawback is that you have to have threat in the first place, or the mob won't be hitting you to trigger the ability. In addition to that, it gives 1 battle point, so between this and Kick, battle points are never an issue. For me, this was the best addition to the Warrior's kit, as it makes blocking feel worthwhile, aside from the occasional damage reduction. Hammering Blow is simply there for the added damage on a separate cooldown of the other abilities. There is the added buff, which gives a 15% damage reduction if your target is below 25% health, but like Pulverize and Smash, these are fairly situational and won't come in handy during normal gameplay, as enemies tend to run around this time. Like Pulverize, however, it is beneficial on longer duration fights, assuming the enemy doesn't run. Both this and Pulverize will come in quite handy in the future if we get to raid bosses with enraged abilities or mechanics that trigger at low health. Shield Throw. I was most excited about Shield Throw and also most let down by this ability. While on paper this ability sounds great, when in practice it doesn't give much benefit. The main benefit would be a 3-second knockdown when pulling a mob, allowing you time to get some distance between you and the enemy while returning to your party or camp. A secondary benefit is knocking down the enemy when it runs, but we also have Smash, Close the Gap, and Storm to do the same thing while costing an additional battle point and having a longer cooldown. I, for one, do not have Shield Throw on my bar and do not plan to use it anytime soon. The last primary action is Mighty Yelp. Again, this is a great ability on paper, but not so much in practice. You're usually fighting 1 enemy at a time, and having the ability to taunt multiple enemies is very situational. Due to the ability bloat I mentioned earlier, I do not see that situation arising often enough to replace another ability I will use every pull. That said, if you have a group with a lot of dot damage and you have a damage shield, this ability can be very nice to keep enemies on you while your party takes them down simultaneously. The added benefit of a snare is also nice, but again, you have abilities like Smash, Close the Gap, and Storm to stop fleeing enemies. Next up, we have 2 new utilities, Cleave and Counterplay. Cleave, which I have no idea why it's a utility, but it is. Cleave is an odd ability, as the game right now for the most part is built around killing 1 enemy at a time. I would also say that if you're trying to fight more than 1 enemy, using a shield is probably the better option. I say this because enemies can hit fairly hard and your healer will thank you for not taking so much damage. That said, Cleave is a nice addition if you choose to fight multiple targets at once. For example, if you have a shaman or a necro in your party that can dot multiple enemies at the same time. The main drawback here is Cleave costs 3 battle points, and without shield, you are no longer receiving the extra battle point from Punish. This means you'll be using all of your battle points for this one ability. You will also lose out on Shield Slam, which is still the only true interrupt for warriors. As for counterplay, this is another great addition to the Warrior Toolkit, as it effectively gives you a high damage shield for 30 seconds every 2 minutes. Stacking this with the Shieldman's Banner for the additional block chance feels very nice, and you can also get off 2 shield block skills while it is active, giving guaranteed blocks for 4 out of the 30 seconds. I like using this on pull if we have 2 or more enemies come to the camp while our enchanter tries to mez. This helps me keep the aggro off of the healer while not focusing and attacking the mobs being mezzed at that time. This skill may be a tad bugged though, as my enchanter told me a couple times I broke mez while not targeting the mob, so further testing is needed. Next up, we have the innate abilities, Shield Prowess and Sturdy Tactician. There's not much to say about these abilities as they are innate and just make using a shield better in every way. The cooldown reduction of the Shield Prowess while fighting multiple enemies is significant, and the readiness generation of Sturdy Tactician helps readiness gain feel okay while not dual wielding. And lastly, we have banners. As I mentioned earlier, this is the best change for warriors with increased duration and radius. These abilities are now just use and forget. The added benefit of having up to 3 of them available all the time is great, as I rarely had room for more than 1 on my utility bar prior to these changes. Now with the addition of Punish to my rotation, I can swap between threat, defense, and offensive banners whenever the need arises, and that feels absolutely awesome. That said, the newest banner, Banner of Warding, is a nice addition for when fighting spellcasters, but I haven't found a case where I would swap to my bar for everyday grinding. It is beneficial for something like Zaruk the Sightweaver or Zedrus Malthier. However, I am glad to have it for those situations. So with these recent changes, this is my setup for most situations right now. Like I said previously, I do swap out some abilities for specific fights, but the majority of the time, this is my ability bar setup. I have Taunt, Kick, Punish, Hammering Blow, Smash, Shield Slam, Close the Gap, and Storm. As far as utilities, I have everything on my bar except for Cleave, as I just don't feel that is worth it at this time. And then for techniques, I usually get 3 stacks of Strike of Breaking for the buff-debuff combo, and I use Mocking Blow for pretty much all readiness other than that, unless threat is not an issue. And if threat is not an issue, I will swap that out for Cross Strike. And then I always have Disarming Strike on my bar and Expose just in case we need those debuffs. Anyway, that is it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!